Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Data Dispatch. Hope everybody has had a wonderful day and had a great weekend. And wow, the markets are really kicking off with a lot of momentum today, and we see a good amount of resiliency within the broader index, with the S&P closing above 6,800. On top of that, we see Palantir that has made an amazing recovery, jumping up about 10% today, including the after hours, with a large gap up during the market open. You could be talking about what's happening with Burry's shorts, especially as NVIDIA and Palantir are some of the biggest movers in today's market. On top of that, we see Ethereum that is starting to catch a bid, more eyeballs looking towards Tom Lee, and we see all of a sudden a lot of optimism coming into the whole financial retail type of X community, when I felt like he was the most hated man last week. So we have a lot of things to break down. We'll be talking about some other stocks, the general market, and the government shutdown that should be coming to an end here in the near future. If you're a new or returning viewer, hit that like button, subscribe for daily videos. Let's try to hit 30,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We're on track. Let's see if we can do it. Follow me on X down below. Pop it up on the screen right here. Palantir at 193.61, up 8.8% with this large green candle with a nice gap up here. You see Palantir really pushes right through this resistance and gaps right over this resistance that has had a lot of choppiness and has had a lot of foundation and consolidation for Palantir, which has acted as a great support level. And this became, resilient after Palantir had a big sell-off right here. That bounce at 170, a lot of that, I think, was relied upon with this recent consolidation and this long base that was built out. Now that you see that Palantir pushes past this resistance, and I think $200 is likely on the table in the short term here, if the momentum in the macroeconomic structure continues to look bullish. Looking in terms of the overnight session on Palantir, up about another 50 cents. Not a ton of big moves, but still some momentum, and we see at 194.20. So cool to see here, Alex Karp always being a very strong founding leader, a very strong CEO for the company, and he's had great responses to, Burry's short position, and also different types of critics that try to short Palantir. Yes, it's a highly valued stock, we know that, but the market and Palantir continues to beat a lot of those doubters out there, especially for those that have been just sitting on the sidelines. So we'll see what happens here. I like to use Palantir as a good barometer for how the whole typical AI trade is playing out, and I can see a lot of momentum that is still continuing, obviously, with its current stock price per share. Now, let's talk about here, just in, the Senate has passed the bill to fund the government and end the longest shutdown in U.S. history. So this bill, now it passed the Senate, is going to be sent to the House of Representatives, which is probably going to be passed just with the majority holdership there. And if it passes in both chambers, then it's going to head, of course, to the president's office to be signed into law. The Senate was the big struggle to get through. The past here, 60-40. So now you see a lot of momentum that's coming back into the market, especially here as you have the NASDAQ that came up like 2.3% here, having its best day since May 27th. And you see a lot of optimism coming into the general broader market. Speaking of that, looking at the S&P 500 here, closing at 68.32, up 1.5% on the day. Now, individual kind of more smaller speculative names that we've been talking about did not make these big moves. The big moves that we saw, a lot of resiliency that helped bring out the broader market, was NVIDIA. NVIDIA in the overnight hours here has now reclaimed the $200 level. This is a very strong kind of resistant and just psychological resistant level that could possibly open up here into tomorrow's trading session. So NVIDIA at that price is great to see in terms of optimism that's coming back into the market. You also see big moves. Just looking at the heat map right here on TSM, on Broadcom, you see on Tesla. So a lot of liquidity that is coming back into the market. Like I said, NVIDIA making a very strong move, and Google up about 4%. So a lot of the Mag 7 stocks doing very well, which is why we see the general market that does show a lot of resiliency. This is awesome in terms of you're probably going to have this specific finalization of the government shutdown officially ending sometime later this week. That's currently being priced in as the markets are very forward-looking right now as we speak, of course, like I said, with the passing at the Senate right here. Let's talk about Ethereum and Bitcoin are starting to catch a bid. We see the administration that's been making a lot of bullish statements about Bitcoin with legislation and with possible bills that are going to be enacted that's basically going to give traditional finance and institutional investments a lot more kind of clarity on structure. And once they have this clarity, that means a ton of liquidity has the possibility to flow into these digital assets. And you see the digital asset treasuries, the DAT stocks, that are starting to gain a lot of retail traction and even institutional traction. It gained my traction with BMNR and especially with Tom Lee, a traditional Wall Street guy that is now being exposed to crypto and is very bullish on it. And he's been right on a lot of his calls. So that's why I've particularly been interested in this recently. With that, Ethereum is starting to catch a bid as Bitcoin kind of reclaimed 107 for a little bit. You see Ethereum right here at 3604. Remember last week when this dropped down to about 3,000, everybody was calling for the next crypto crash. And you can see right here at 3604, kind of stabilizing over the last 24 hours. Basically hasn't moved a ton. You see a little bit of a drop down here to about 35. Support was held there and then now back to 36. So we'll see what happens. But how that correlates to BMNR right here at 42.35. Also catching a decent bid, specifically why BMNR above $40 is incredibly important in my own eyes in terms of a technical perspective, is just because the last time BMNR had this huge, insane pump up here to the 70s and whatever, when it came down, it had a strong bounce at the 40s before we saw some consolidation, some bigger swings kind of between the 40 and the 60 and here in the 50s, and then we saw it drop down here, finding a bottom at 35. Reclaiming, I think, the support level is a strong area for the bulls to maintain to have that next possible push back into that 50 area. One thing about BMNR is this is a highly volatile stock. So if you can't stomach volatility, then it's probably, not something we want to drop a lot of eggs in. Of course, do your own research out there. I'm not a financial advisor, but in order to stomach some of this volatility, this is kind of a leverage position on Ethereum, which is already a very volatile asset. You can see already just swinging all around right now as we speak. One of the big things in terms of updating for BMNR's holdings is that it acquires 110,000 Ethereum over the past week, now owning over 2.9% of the entire Ethereum supply. Why this is incredibly bullish, and Tom Lee is accumulating Ethereum at a rapid pace as he has some very large price targets that almost seem out of this world, that seem unrealistic. It'll be really interesting to see what happens so we can look back in history. But as of right now, just kind of holding the boat, want to possibly be part of any type of a Q4 rally. And if it doesn't happen, then hey, it just doesn't happen. Being able to stomach that volatility like I mentioned before. In terms of right here with Tom Lee accumulating right now, trying to get to the 5% with the alchemy of the 5% power, hopefully can introduce staking in the near future. As I said, more crypto clarity should be coming with legislation. The recent dip right here in Ethereum prices here, an attractive opportunity. Tom Lee is continuing to buy the dip. And we're seeing this across the board. Looking right here, looking at this stat, that institutional investments right now has 187 long institutional owners and 0 institutional shorts. So with big money that is coming in here, these are large movers. BMNR is forming a very strong base right here at the low 40s. If we continue to see consolidation here at the low 40s, building out this base, especially with Ethereum underneath 4,000, as these institutions are continuing to accumulate at a rapid rate, the longer the base, the bigger the possible breakout. So I guess we'll just be sitting to see what happens. It's early November. We've seen choppiness in the market. An insane amount of volatility in the market. I mean, the S&P 500 was just like at 6650 last Friday, now back, up about another 200 points already. So we'll be seeing what happens. In terms of some of the AI data center stocks, actually catching a little bit of some selling pressure today. Things like Cypher Mining, which I'm so bullish on, down about 5% here. You see things like Nebius now down here at 109. It'll be interesting to see if this has another bounce and testing support at that 100. Very interesting spot for Nebius. And even CoreWeave right back here, back to 105. And even in the overnight hours, down to $98. So in the AI data center stocks, seeing a lot of selling pressure. We'll see what happens in terms of where liquidity is going to full flow to. But other than that, I'll be keeping it on the radar and keeping you guys up to date as best as I can. Peace out. Take care. Be careful out there, especially with a lot of uncertainty in the market right now. And have a great day.